The drama at Russia's Amazon, the saga of the Bakalchuks, the messy divorce amid the merger of the online marketplace Wildberries and a much smaller outdoor advertising company called Russ Group, has led to some surprising events in the last few months. But nothing was wilder than a deadly shootout on September 18th at a Wildberries office in Moscow. Wildberries founder and CEO Tatyana Kim, who recently restored her maiden name, has been having a hell of a time shaking loose her husband, Vladislav Bakalchuk. But their very public divorce is just the tip of the iceberg in what's become a battle between some of the most powerful political groups in Russia's North Caucasus. So let's talk about the Wildberries office shootout and the clan war at its center. Welcome to the Naked Pravda. Howdy, folks. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Rothrock, the managing editor of Meduza in English. I'll admit to you now that this week's subject matter is pretty damn confusing. We're diving into the world of Chechen, Dagestani, and Ingush clan politics, which means the story revolves around violent actions by shady characters with murky ties to big businesses, government office, and the police. First, let's recap what happened at Wildberries on September 18th. Vladislav Bakalchuk, the soon-to-be ex-husband of Wildberries founder and CEO Tatyana Kim, tried to storm the company's office in the Romanov Dvor Business Center, just a few hundred yards from the Kremlin itself. Bakalchuk has very publicly opposed the Wildberries Russ Group merger and recently met with Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov to plead his case, winning the dictator's support. Bakalchuk showed up to Romanov Dvor with two former senior executives from the company, but more importantly, he was accompanied by former and current Chechen police officers and National Guardsmen, as well as some trained martial artists from Chechnya, including former world and European Taekwondo champion Umar Chachayev. Exactly the kind of people you'd bring to a business meeting. According to Novaya Gazeta Europe, it was Chachayev who started shooting his automatic pistol after he was hit by shots from a rubber bullet gun. Chachayev reportedly fired his service weapon, though his status in the National Guard is a bit fuzzy. Chachayev's older brother, an influential former Special Forces commander in Chechnya, later came to the hospital where his brother was being treated and tried to break him out. But that little operation also failed. On the other side of the conflict, defending the Wildberries office, was another team of police and police-adjacent men, these with ties to Ingushetia, one of the republic's neighboring Chechnya. According to Novaya Gazeta, Wildberries had recently hired a private security company with ties to Ingush State Duma deputy Bekkhan Barakhoev, who until just 3 years ago worked as a vice president of a subsidiary of Russ Group, the smaller company that is now merging with Wildberries. In all this, the most important shadow figure at Russ Outdoor is Suleiman Kerimov, a billionaire senator from Dagestan. You'll hear a lot more about him later on the show. Long story short, the office shootout left 2 Ingush men dead and more than 24 suspects in police custody, though Vladislav Bakalchuk miraculously escaped charges as a mere witness. He claims they just showed up for a planned business meeting, but Tatyana Kim calls the incident a failed attempt at a hostile takeover. All that is a very superficial overview of recent events and some of the clan rivalries at play in this conflict. To learn more about this story from someone who actually understands it, I spoke to Ilya Shumanov, the General Director of Transparency International Russia in Exile.
Actually, there were police officers from the both sides of the conflict.
What does that mean exactly? There's only one police force?
Yeah.
You saying each side had
Each
side had law enforcement with it?
Yeah, law enforcement and the police officers. Some of them they were from Rosguardia, some of them from the Ministry of Internal Affairs, but
Okay.
Officials from law enforcement from the both sides. Yeah, some of them came with delegation with Bakalchuk, Vladislav Bakalchuk. Some of them were already there with defenders. Let's call them. Yeah, and some police officers they were only observers. They came on the police cars and they just observed the situation and did nothing during this conflict. And it means that there are, let's say, independent groups from the law enforcement who supported each side of the conflict.
So there's like 3 groups of police then. There's the Wildberries has police that it's recruited, the Bakalchuk has his, and then there's just some cops that were called essentially on the day.
Yeah, it's funny to hear, but
pretty messy. It sounds complicated.
Well, yeah, but it's true. Yeah.
Okay. So I think that Ramzan Kadyrov is somewhat of a known entity for even foreigners. I mean, he gets news coverage around the world for being who he is. But What's so special about Suleiman Kerimov? Because a billionaire, a member of the Federation Council, so he has legal immunity. Obviously, his power is less obvious than Kadyrov, it seems to me, and yet here he is in a conflict with Kadyrov, and he seems to have won this round at least. Because I don't know, it seems like Kadyrov's had to run away with his tail between his legs. He's like lost this particular conflict. So can you lay out for listeners who is this Kerimov individual?
Yeah, he is long-term senator in Russian Council Federation, part of Russian parliament. He didn't use this platform for doing any legislative work, and he didn't do any statements during his being in office as a senator. And I suppose you're absolutely right when you're naming him as, let's say, the person who would like to receive this parliamentary immunity, yeah, because of his status. Actually, Kerimov is businessman, and at the same time, he is a senator. It's possible in Russia, only in Russia, maybe, yeah. And he has extensive experience.
You could be president of the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is a legal side of this
Yeah,
story.
yeah. Right,
Yeah.
right, right.
Yeah, and Kerimov has extensive experience in anti-crisis management, so-called anti-crisis management. Actually, he came to some difficult or complicated business situations and tried to repack and resell these assets. When he, let's say, achieved any, let's say, success in negotiation with one of the sides, there were several cases. For example, one case in 2010 when he bought Uralkali from Dmitry Rybolovlev. He's also Russian oligarch. And 3 years later, he sold this asset to Mikhail Prokhorov and Dmitry Mazepin. Yeah, and there were such cases, there are plenty of such cases in his business track. And I suppose that maybe this project, let's call about the merging between Wildberries and the second company, Russ Outdoor, is something like the case I mentioned previously.
Sources have told the news outlet The Bell that Suleiman Kerimov became acquainted with Tatyana Kim after a major fire this January that gutted one of the Wildberries warehouses and triggered a wave of regulatory problems because the facility was missing official licenses and things like fire inspections. Officials opened a criminal investigation, but that case went nowhere, apparently thanks to networking provided by Kerimov, who put the Wildberries CEO in a room with Russ Outdoor's management and, most importantly, senior officials in the Kremlin, eventually including Putin himself. The president reportedly endorsed the idea of a merger as a means of creating a new corporate entity supposedly capable of rivaling the likes of Amazon, building an international payment system to bypass the SWIFT network, boosting Russia's national GDP, and so on. Journalists at the Dossier Center reported in August that the government's real interest in boosting Wildberries is to make it more competitive across the Eurasian Economic Union by expanding its access to local warehouses. Vladislav Bakalchuk was against the deal from the start, but, as the Bell explains, he has had a weak hand, owning just 1% of Wildberries. Meanwhile, the company he actually controls, BV Development, faces multi-billion ruble fines for failure to meet contractual obligations.
It's a complicated situation. Let's say the divorce between husband and wife, between partners. Yeah, and it's very complicated situation when Suleiman Kerimov came to this company and tried to repack and then sell to other party, for example. Yeah, and his role is quite unique in Russia, but actually he is doing GR work. He is directly related to Dagestan, and he could be named as a shadow head of Dagestan because he did the number of projects and charity projects and business project in Dagestan, and nothing happens without him in Dagestan. And that's why we can call him the shadow head. Geographically, it has a border with Chechnya, and that's why there are a lot of tension between these two regions from 19th till today. Yeah, and we are seeing these tensions, it's official tensions about the transfer of the border or between these two regions and demarcation of the border and so on and so on. And there are plenty of examples of these conflicts between people from both regions. And this conflict is not only about, let's say, this corporate structure like Wildberries, but also about tension between regions because there are two North Caucasian clans who are trying to receive control and to seize this opportunity to control Wildberries.
And so you compared what's happening now with Wildberries to what Kerimov did with this fertilizer company 14 years ago, where he bought it and then sold it for more. Essentially, he flipped it. So, what exactly is his relation? I know that like you said, he's doing GR work, government relations work, to basically help Tatyana Kim. Do you subscribe to the idea that needed it because of the fire at the warehouse that then created police problems for her and regulatory problems, or is there some other reason that she suddenly needed GR work that actually required a merger that takes away, some of her control over her own company?
Yeah, there are two versions and two possible explanation of involvement of Kerimov in this merging. The first is the official story is that there was a big fire in some storages related to Wildberries, and that's why she needs some money or some support to handle this problem. And the second one is actually it's about financial side of the business, and we are seeing that some of the shares of the current business they're pledged to VTB Bank. It's a big state-owned bank, and the possible buyer of Wildberries, as I understand, for the further developments maybe, because VTB provided number of loans to Wildberries, and could be also the explanation about the necessity of involvement of Kerimov and his work with presidential administration.
But exactly how does Suleiman Kerimov benefit from this merger with Russ Outdoor? Because I know that the business, this outdoor billboard advertising company, which is big, but it's not as big as Wildberries. This is like this is a discrepancy that a lot of people have drawn attention to, saying, "Oh, well, this is why this merger's so suspicious." The Russ Outdoor formerly belongs to the Mirzan brothers, as I understand it, and they claim that Kerimov has no technical relationship with the company. I think they have said that he's like a friend of the business, but maybe they haven't met him directly, which I guess is just they're lying. It seems. But can you explain for me how Kerimov actually benefits from this merger? I know that he's doing the Wildberries business a favor, and I assume that leads to all kinds of arrangements. But is there some kind of direct connection here is monetary? Because it just seems a little different to me than the purchase of the fertilizer company, because that was him buying a business and then reselling it, whereas this is more complicated.
It's more complicated. Kerimov has never appeared as a shareholder of the company. There are plenty of managers in his inner circle who are really doing these manager functions. And really, Mirzayan brothers, they're not the real shareholders. There are some nominee shareholder who was previously a driver in this Russ Outdoor, who owns 50% shares of the Mirzayan brothers company, Russ Outdoor. It's funny thing here, but actually the driver, former driver, now he is a shareholder. Yeah, that's how it looks like from my perspective.
Sorry, just so I understand, one of the Mirzayan brothers was a former driver, or one of the
No, no, no,
shareholders
no,
of?
no, no. There's another one
Mhm.
guy who owns 50% of the company. The company named Steen. This company owns 35% of the newborn company that owned Wildberries now. And this 50% of this company belongs to Grigory Sadayan, who was driver in Rus Outdoor Company. And other 50% belong to Mirzayan brothers.
So this is just evidence that the whole ownership structure of Rusator is a bunch of like fronts. It's like that
Yeah, yeah,
we're
yeah.
not really seeing who. Yeah, okay.
Roman.
But Wildberries is, when we talk about Tatyana Kim, she's the real owner, right?
Yeah.
She's nobody's driver.
No, she's nobody's driver, I suppose. Yeah.
Okay.
And she owns 65%. Like, as I said, Mirzayan, Kerimov, this group, this bunch of people all own 35% of the newborn company, and 65% belongs to Tatyana Kim. She's still a major shareholder of this joint company. I mean, Wildberries,
Right.
but 35 belong to this Kerimov's group people.
Are the Mirzayan brothers anybody significant? Like, are they just good friends of Karimov, or they're like above drivers? They're not just somebody's drivers, but they're not the true power. They're not the real owners. So, like, where would you place them between somebody's driver in
Uh,
Kerimov? Like they're
it's it's tough to say. Yeah, actually, they're real businessmen. They known in Russian market as a businessman, but actually, of course, they received the plenty of state contracts from the state organizations, state bodies, but because of Kerimov. And a number of sources in the market say that only because of Kerimov they achieved this success and the company with a billion turnover. But I suppose they are, let's say, the minor partners of Kerimov, and they're having this peace just because Kerimov is somewhere nearby. That's my point about Mirzayan brothers.
I had a question I
Yeah,
meant to ask you before when we were talking about the actual shootout. What did Bakalchuk and his men intend from your perspective? What did they hope to achieve? Because it seems a little bit strange to show up at he shows up with a few guys and he tries to force his way into the office. In your mind, what was he hoping to achieve? Because I would imagine that even if they got in and locked the doors behind them, that doesn't then give them control over the business, I would think. What were they hoping to do?
I think that there is only one explanation here. And actually, he was an equal partner with his wife during years in this business. But in the formal documents, in the papers, he has only 1% of the company. And it looks like that he tried to influence the decision of the management to receive the other 49% of the shares. And this was his actual claim. He tried to, let's say, to receive the part of the company, like the 50%, as equal partner. And Kadyrov's people think that he really owns this part and try to, let's say, to provide this sort of communication to counterparty.
Does he have a legal claim to that through the divorce
Oh,
or
no. I
okay.
don't think that there is an option to prove this, let's say, equal parts because there is a formal document and only 1%. But number of sources on the market said that they were equal partner with wife and they did a lot of, let's say, joint decision. They was involved in the business management of the company, and that's it. But on the papers, he has only 1%.
A quick clarification amid this whole scandal, Tatyana Kim has publicly stated several times that Vladislav Bakalchuk had no involvement in the development or management of Wildberries. It seems to me as though, and I think I said this before, that Kadyrov's clan or his group, they lost this little fight here. Although I know that Kadyrov himself hasn't been called out or anything by Putin or by any police unit, but like it seems as though this attempt to exert themselves didn't work. And so I wonder like what this means for this particular clan battle over the wild bears essentially.
Look, there is no official meeting with Kadyrov because every time when Kadyrov, let's say, appeared in some complicated situation, he trying to seize opportunity and to be nearby Putin to show that he's still loyal, and Putin would like to say some good words about him. Actually, that is not happening now. He's not somewhere nearby Putin, and he didn't appear still in the Kremlin as he appeared previously in during the such cases and such conflicts, and it means that he could be not the person who lost the support from Putin, but maybe from presidential administration there are some tensions between Kadyrov's and presidential administration, and it means that this is a bad signal for him. I mean, about future of Kadyrov. And I would like to step back just to mention Barakhoev. Barakhoev is the second person who involved in this conflict from Tatyana Kim's side because he's a State Duma deputy from Ingushetia. And he is also involved in this conflict because he worked for this Russ Outdoor company for years and was a vice president of this company. And actually, he provides support and, let's say, this power support for Tatyana Kim. And it looks like he was deeply involved in handling this conflict because people who died, they both guys, they were from Ingushetia. And actually, during the funerals, there was a big delegation and a lot of people from Ingushetia region and from elites of this region came to this funeral to show respect to these guys who died during this conflict. And it means that there is not only Dagestan and Suleiman Kerimov, but also Ingushetia and Barakhoev involvement in this conflict. And it looks like this is two different regions, Ingushetia and Dagestan, who are trying to resist against Kadyrov and Chechen groups in Moscow. And it's
Do you see that as like Tatyana Kim has outmaneuvered Kadyrov by going to the two republics that are outside Chechnya and she's encircled him, or is that Kadyrov's enemies are taking advantage of Tatyana Kim, or it's mutually beneficial?
yeah, I don't have answer on your question
All
actually,
right,
but
okay.
I'm also considering about what it means
Right. I'm just
for
interested because, like, Novaya Gazeta, I think, has a story out where they describe Tatyana Kim as like it's the first public slap in the face to Kadyrov, and it comes from a woman. And it's a very nice headline. It's like, oh yeah, like she is, in many ways. I'm not saying in all ways, but in many ways, she's kind of an inspiring figure because she's the richest woman in Russia. She built this business basically, herself, and she's. I mean, like a lot of billionaires have these exciting personality cults, and she has one too. So it's just kind of interesting to me who's getting played the worst or the best in this story. I know it's hard to say.
it's hard to say, but actually, I would like to focus on the people who are backing her, and this is a member of parliament from Ingushetia, and Suleiman Kerimov, actually the shadow governor of Dagestan, and that's why Novaya Gazeta could, let's say, public this statement, this heads about slapping Kadyrov from lady, yeah, because of this very, very big support from people from two northern Caucasian regions. That's my point.
And then just briefly, how do you see this kind of raider takeover? Do you see this as becoming more frequent?
This is a separate story, but we have to mention there is a process of the nationalization in Russia, the changing of the shareholders of the companies, and the government plays a great role here because it's seizing assets from the private shareholders into the state ownership. And this is ongoing process. Let's say hundreds companies privatized and then nationalized during this period of time. Let's say several years. There is also request from the people who loyal to Kremlin but who are not involved in this process massively, like Kadyrov, Kerimov, Ingushetia, Kabardino-Balkaria, and other regions who sent the hundreds and thousands people to Ukraine to fight for Russia, for Putin there, and they would like to claim some bonuses for themselves. I mean, the elites. And this is a sort of providing these benefits from Kremlin to these guys, providing them opportunity to receive new assets on occupied territory and also in Russia, because some of the Western business live in Russia. For example, Danone. And then the nephew of Kadyrov became the head of this company and he received control under this company. And during this nationalization process, the right of property and property rights, they became very, very, they disappeared actually. Yeah.
Loosey goosey, yeah.
Uh,
Hmm.
it's easy to come and to take control on every company because there is ongoing process of the change these shareholders. And from my personal point of view, Kadyrov and Kerimov, they only, let's say, the top of the iceberg here. They're trying to struggle and to fight for these big assets like Wildberries. But there are plenty of medium enterprises and the big businesses, but outside of their Romanov Dvor and inner circle of, let's say, Kremlin, yeah, somewhere. And it means that there's a process of the raiding of these companies. It's an ongoing process, and the hundreds of the companies in the regions of Russia, they're now in the process of raiding from these powerful groups. It's not only about Kadyrov, it's not only about Northern Caucasian class, but about the people with the powerful connections. Mostly these guys who have these connections with FSB, Minister of Internal Affairs, or Rosguardia, General Prosecutor's Office, and so on and so on.
Thanks for tuning in, folks. This has been The Naked Pravda, a podcast from Meduza in English. Remember that undesirable status back in Russia means our entire news outlet now relies on readers and listeners around the world to support our work. Please visit our website for information about how to become a contributor with one-time or recurring pledges. Thanks again. Until next week.